I have my headphones in. But I tested it, and it does work, which means I can continue to move around. And I'm building skateboards right now, and I want to continue to build skateboards. And I don't want to do this later because I was feeling like making a video now. Been listening to YouTube and just building skateboards, and I don't know. It came up in my head that I was like, well, I did this live chat with Les not too long ago. I wanted to kind of have some talks about kind of the ongoing political stuff and how it's affecting business, and it didn't really go there. Kind of just like let Les lead, which I think is what you ought to do when you're having a live chat with somebody. Well, I didn't really have a choice. Les was a hell of a talker, and I couldn't deter him. So we went in his direction, and that was cool. But we didn't really get to talk about the China manufacturing, the tariffs, how that was affecting business for Les, how it was affecting business for myself, how it was affecting our ability to work together. And that was important to me. And so I kind of, left a hole in my heart. And I wanted to be able to talk about that. Welcome to live chat. I wonder how, I don't really know how to start a Q&A. You could ask a question if that works. I'm just learning how to do this. See what happens. So anyway, I did want to kind of like tackle, the first elephant in the room, I guess, when it comes to the fact that we make our products in China, which we do. I've never been shy about saying so, because the fact of the matter is I really made a strong effort to do things the way that I thought that they should be done back in the day. And back in the day when I started Pantheon Longboards, I really did think that you really ought to make product here, because well, I guess at the time I had gone to China. I'd gone to China once when I was working for Pantheon Boards back in the day, and I had also gone to North Carolina and seen our manufacturing there, and I guess I just felt like I knew the North Carolina manufacturing. I went to Guangdong, Dongguan, is this city inside of Guangdong, and I really didn't like how I couldn't see the sky. Like, I never saw the sky while I was there. I mean, I saw pollution in the sky, or like, kind of those gray clouds that just kind of never go away. I think that was the main thing, was I just felt like this was sort of like not the way that things were supposed to get done. It wasn't good for the world to like ship things all across the world, ship things from China to the United States, and then ship them all the way back to Asia or Europe or whatever. It felt like a lot of waste. And so I really felt strongly about making products here in the States. I'm just gonna keep moving because I gotta keep making boards. But that is why we got the audio hooked up to my headphones. So we started off in North Carolina because I felt like that was the right thing to do. I wanted to support local jobs. I wanted to minimize waste, and that was really important to me. It just felt like all the waste that occurs, all the plastic and all the the shipping materials and all that stuff, and the shipping itself and the gasoline and all that. It just felt like the right thing to do was to try to minimize the waste, support local jobs. So we started manufacturing in North Carolina, and I'll be honest, I thought it was. I really enjoyed working with our manufacturer in North Carolina. It was natural manufacturing, and I was working with a guy named Butch. Butch ran the factory, and people who know the skateboard industry, which is a small number of people, but a lot of people hear the name Butch and they get a weird taste in their mouth, because I know Butch has kind of gotten and earned bad rapport with some people. I think ultimately, you know, what happens when people struggle is that struggle kind of spreads around a little bit. And when Butch went out of business, which he eventually did, it really hurt a lot of people on the way out. And so that was tough. So anyway, I mean, I guess the long story short with Butch is, well, he went out of business. But before he went out of business, my experience with working with him was that we had a lot of wasted product. I mean, like, I'm talking 30% of the product was warped, was bad, you know, in some way, either graphic problems or warpage was really kind of the number one problem. And part of that is my fault, because we have really complex shapes, and you know, if we simplified our shapes significantly, and you know, you cut a crooked shape in a much more flat mold, and it doesn't stand out so intensely. But because we choose to make these really complex shapes, and we choose to make them for good reason, you know, it adds strength and adds ergonomic elements, and ultimately, you know, creates a better product, which is, I think, what a lot of people know Pantheon for. But the downside of that is, if you don't have this like extreme attention to detail, you end up with a lot of bad product. And we had, like I said, about 30% of our product was bad coming out of that factory. And I'm sure that doesn't help someone stay in business, that's for sure. I don't think that that's why Butch went out of business by any means. It was probably a lot of things. But it really hurt us. It really hurt our ability to stay in business, because I didn't get discounts for bad product. I mean, the fact of the matter is, Butch went out of business because, you know, he wasn't able to pay his bills. And it's not like I had a whole lot of leverage with him being a really small company, you know, not making a ton of product, and with him already struggling. I mean, you can't really push a person who's not profitable to be less profitable. I didn't want that for him, and you know, it was kind of, in my opinion, it was like, well, it was appropriate for me to price our products accordingly to, you know, to make up for that waste that we incurred. So, yeah, I mean, a long story short, I guess, with my experience with Butch was that, you know, he went out of business, and that we had a lot of wasted product, and that was tough on our business. So then we moved, because I still felt really strongly about, you know, keeping things as local as possible. Although I would say that the pickings began to get slim, and they kind of already were. And so we moved our product to Chapman Manufacturing, which was based out of not New York City, Long Island. And the company was based out of Long Island. They shipped out of Long Island, but they made their boards actually up in Maine. And the Maine manufacturing was interesting, because I really got to go see it firsthand, like I did with Butch. And I thought of something that I'll kind of chip in here in a sec, but you know, I got to see their manufacturing firsthand, and this factory was a rather large wood shop, but had a very small section of the wood shop dedicated to skateboarding. And the wood shop really stayed open. I guess they were making products for LL Bean for their Christmas catalog, and they made like chairs and stuff like that. And it was very clear that skateboarding wasn't a big part of this factory, because there were only like 3 or 4 people making skateboards, and the whole rest of the factory was kind of like full at the time, making other products. I guess these chairs, I didn't actually see them in production, but I got to meet some of the people. And it was like 2 older ladies in their like mid 50s or maybe low 60s, probably low 60s. That really just like, I mean, they looked like they were on their way out. They were, wonderful people, but it was my understanding that they had basically like they couldn't afford to retire. So I guess they probably were in their 60s. I think they had a social security check coming in, and this was like to supplement that social security check. So I knew they weren't making very much money at all. They only had health care because they had, because they were old enough to have Medicare. Yeah, Medicare. I always get Medicare and Medicaid mixed up. But it just felt like it was kind of, I don't want to call it a dire situation, but it wasn't a situation that looked like it had a lot of staying power. And that kind of was obvious based on the expertise of the shop itself. The Chapman brothers, Greg and Glenn, Greg would go up and he would do like the CNC programming and stuff for products, because they didn't have any people in the actual wood shop who could make the products, or I'm sorry, who could program the CNC. They didn't have that expertise there. So that was kind of a sign in itself. It was like, this place is kind of like underutilized in a way, like they couldn't afford to pay somebody that had those expertise to work in the skateboard side of the shop. They had a guy who, basically loaded the product onto, the CNC table and had, cut the products. But that's like more of, I don't want to undermine the job, but granted, I've been this job before. It's basically a glorified button pusher. It's a person who sets up a product on the table, watches it get cut, and, is kind of in charge of making sure that there aren't any significant mistakes. And you might like make a very small adjustment to the programming to, get your zeros right or something like that. But that's about as far as that expertise goes. So Greg would drive from New York all the way up to Maine, and he would, do that a couple times a year and do the CNC programming for the various products if there were any changes in the product. And most of the stuff they were doing was popsicle street decks. So there weren't a lot of programming changes. It really, it wasn't until I joined in with him and I started kind of pushing him to, do these more complex shapes and all that stuff, and, that it was really required. And so I actually went up to Maine with him, and I got to partake in that, and that's how I met these people. But all that is to say, like, I mean, I enjoyed working with them. I think what I enjoyed most about working with them was just that they were really good people. I mean, Greg and Glenn are just incredible people. I don't think that they're doing a whole lot in skateboarding these days, which kind of goes to my next point, which is just that, it felt like it wasn't going to happen with them. It felt like over time things were getting more difficult, not less difficult, for them to run their business and to meet deadlines and to not make kind of unforced errors. You get a deck and it has a 1-ply thick wheel well on it, and that's just like, I mean, it's painful. It's like an unusable board. And, we had a run of decks do that at one point. And, it's just like if you have people making the boards that really understand what they're doing because they understand skateboarding or because they understand, the needs of the product, mistakes like that don't get made. But, when you have, basically like elderly people getting supplementary income with not a whole lot of like expertise in the actual skating, I mean, obviously none of these people had ever ridden a skateboard, at least to my understanding. Well, then mistakes like that can get made, and you end up with a lot of wasted product again. So that was I stuck it out with them for a while because I really liked them, but the business was tough at times, and at some point I started looking for a way to have more control over the product, because I didn't want to see mistakes get made that didn't need to be made. And so I started looking for a way to make boards myself. And I didn't have the money. I mean, our business was tiny at the time, and I wasn't going to start a manufacturing facility myself, let alone that I needed to make a secondary income. So it was like, you know, it wasn't even really an option for me. With the income I was making off of skateboards at that time, it was really just going back into the business, and that was it. So I ended up teaming up with some guys in Denver who ran a skate shop, and I think the capital came from real estate money, and I was able to help open a manufacturing facility here in Denver. And actually, I designed the layout of the factory. I found all the equipment and helped secure the equipment myself. And I basically got, placed in charge of this factory here in Denver, and I worked that for a quite measly salary. I think I was making $30,000 a year in 2017 in Denver. It was basically hardly enough money to be able to pay rent, and I had a kid, and I had some real life stuff to worry about at the time. So once again, I found myself working extra jobs. I started driving Lyft in the off hours, and ultimately I had to leave that job because I didn't own the factory myself, and therefore I did not have control over the business plan. And the way that the owners of that factory wanted to operate, I just did not believe was going to be economically feasible. I mean, they were trying to sell dinghies to land yachts and, cruisers to Arbor and shit like that. And it just like, I didn't want my time being valued against Chinese manufacturing, because at least at the time, that's where they were getting those products made. Dinghies were definitely getting made in China at that time. I hear they've moved to Mexico, but I don't know. And I didn't want, my time and effort and manufacturing power getting placed against, workers across the globe who didn't have the same kind of rent that I had. And so I pushed back pretty heavily on those particular business decisions, of making dinghies and and stuff like that at our factory. And I really wanted them to create a factory label. That was kind of my answer for making that project profitable. Was basically, instead of making a deck and selling it for $35 or whatever it was, to a company, maybe that works because our companies need. I guess this thing isn't working. We can take this Q&A thing. Maybe I can't take it off. And nobody's asking questions. Or maybe I set it up for me to ask questions. I don't know. But yeah, I thought at the time, we could supplement the lack of income or lack of profitability that's really available in what we call OEM manufacturing, where you make a factory makes a product and it puts the name of a brand on another product. At the time, I felt like what we could do is make a factory brand, and that would be a way for us to manufacture products there and make more of a profit. Instead of selling a board for $35 or $40 to a company, we could sell a board for $85, $90, maybe $100, straight to a customer. Factory designed by me, high level design going into the product, but unbranded basically, or no graphic or something like that. But anyway, they didn't take me up on that, so that's that. because I worked there for a year, and I, at no point while I was there, was able to, really afford my rent. um, at some point I started driving for Lyft, and I realized I was making more money from waking up at 5 a.m. and driving Lyft for 2.5 hours before I went to work for 10. I was making more money in that 2.5 hours than I was making in the 10 following hours, and I just at some point I couldn't justify it any further. So I quit working for the factory, and the factory went out of business 6 months later. So my feelings on the profitability at that factory were justified and reinforced. So I'll answer that in a second. So it was towards the end of that factory experience where I was trying to design a board that we had not made in probably, well, at least one full year. It was the Pantheon trip, and the trip was historically our best seller at the time, and it was going to require a pretty drastic, intense mold, and I had tried to make it, and I paid for the mold, and we made it there, and we just could not make that board without it cracking. It was just cracking left and right. It's just, I don't know. We were having a lot of problems at that factory. It wasn't just the trip. It was a lot of boards. They were warping easily. Manufacturing, I think, in Denver, it can be tough unless you use some specific methods. And the methodology that we had there was this kind of like microwave mold system, and it was really cool and it was really efficient, but it was creating a lot of problems that we were trying to navigate, and it was quite difficult to figure out. So then we were trying to cold press the trip, which I knew was never going to be the way to actually make the board, but we were just trying to, I guess, troubleshoot it and figure out one step at a time what was going on and how to fix the problems. And I think between my frustration with trying to make the trip in Denver and my increasing frustration with that factory, hold on one second. My wife just walked in. Hey, babe. I'm doing a YouTube live.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Did you get? I got that the light heaters from Amazon.
Uh-huh.
And I was just wondering if it got
Delivered.
Delivered.
I haven't picked it up, but we can check it here shortly. Okay. I've got 16 people watching.
Oh wow. Okay. Sorry to interrupt.
It's okay.
But you're not like, it's not like a lesson.
It's not a less interview, no. No, it's just me rambling about manufacturing.
Okay, well, let me ramble on. I'm going to go out to pack stuff.
Okay, honey.
Love you.
Good luck finding the book.
Thank you.
Gosh, where was I? Oh yeah, okay, I know. So I think between the increasing frustration that I was dealing with trying to manufacture the trip and really just trying to make my life work as a manufacturer myself, I decided to reach out to my friend in China, who I had visited while I was at Boston, and grown had a pretty good relationship with this guy, Yuchi, who was kind of like the man in manufacturing at the time. And I said, Yuchi, I've got this board that I cannot figure out how to make. I'm just cracking it left and right. And it's really kind of like the key to me making this brand work. And I just want to see, do you want to try to make it? And let's just see if we can get this thing made. And he said, yep, send me the files. And so I sent him the files, and I think it was probably less than a month later, he sends me a prototype board, and it is like the best looking board I've ever seen. And it was just like, I mean, it was really frustrating. It was difficult to really kind of come to grips with that hard reality. But the way I see it, Yuchi was probably making $250,000 to $500,000 skateboards a year, and I had made 2,000, 2,500, 3,000 boards that year for manufacturing at this factory. And Yuchi knows stuff that I didn't know. That's the hard reality, you know. It's tough. It's a tough reality because you want to believe, and I wanted to believe that I could do it better. You know, I don't know. Maybe it's that like American exceptionalism bullshit or something like that. But I felt like hey, I can figure this out, and because of my attention to detail, I can do a better job than these mass manufacturers who just aren't necessarily going to put the same care into this product that I'm going to put into this product because it's mine. And that proved to be false. I mean, the reality that I learned there in that experience was that that manufacturing experience and machinery and capital and all that stuff, it really made a big difference in the manufacturing process. I need a minute again. What's up? Oh, I saw it. He texted us.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, if you want to give him the go ahead, go ahead. Yeah.
So that's with the materials.
I didn't see the cost.